What's your worst story from the throw him in the pool, he'll learn how to swim parenting style? Not my story, but my mom's. She developed a phobia after she was thrown into a pool to learn how to swim. At the age of 70, she still doesn't know how to. She's terrified of being on the water, even in a safety vest. And then, some fake clairvoyant told her she would die by drowning. So we spent our summers in the mountains as far away from being on water. Edit: she was thrown in the water as a child, not as a 70-year-old. Edit 2, fake clairvoyant. Real one. Same difference, haha. I was scared of the deep end, so my dad threw me in. My cousin parked an inflatable mattress in the corner I was in immediately. My parents supposedly yelled at him to move, he didn't. I don't know how long I was under the mattress for, but I was spitting up water/choking when I came back up. I was maybe 6 at the time. Wow, so the double whammy. Parents and cousin double teaming you to get you to drown. Hurt my arm playing football during morning break at school, was sent home by the school nurse. My dad said it was fine. Bandaged it and sent me to school the next day, only for them to send me home again within an hour. My mum made my dad take me to hospital and my arm was broken. My wrist had spilt lengthways, it was in casts for 9 months. I was secretly buzzing, to be honest, because, well, that showed him the knob. Edit: wow. Appreciate the upvotes and awards, guys and gals. My father did the same thing. I broke my left arm on the trampoline when I was like 5 and I came in the house crying and he told me I was being dramatic and didn't take me to the hospital until the next day. My younger cousin, 4 at the time, was a climber and always needed help getting down. His dad told his mom to leave him. He'll either learn how to get down himself or stop climbing. Cousin ended up climbing onto the roof, fell off and got impaled on a fence pole. One very expensive trip to the ER and he now has a cool scar on his thigh. Edit: he did not stop climbing, he just got better ways to get off the roof. Not a parental neglect story, but that reminds me of being 6 and jumping off our 2-story house. My family was roofers and they were fixing the roof. My uncle was walking around the driveway and I decided it would be fun to yell, "Catch me!" as I leapt. He did indeed catch me. My parents about had heart attacks laughing my butt off. Laughing out loud. You probably have your uncle a heart attack too. He couldn't live the rest of his life being the one who didn't catch you. I actually used to be a swim teacher in college, teaching private lessons in people's backyards because of parents who had thrown their kids into the pool to sink or swim. It was usually moms calling me for help because they heard from a friend of a friend that I was able to teach their kid and get them to like the water again in about a month or less. One kid, he was 7, I had to sit with him on the pool deck the whole first lesson and bring buckets of water to him, and his dad had dunked him multiple times and insisted that his son would just figure it out eventually because that's how he learned. Needless to say, he was never home when I was there. The mom had me come while dad was at work. 4 weeks later, she had me come later in the afternoon so he would come home towards the end of the lesson. His dad saw his son swimming and cried happy tears. He had no idea I had been there 3 days a week for a month. My favorite student was a 70-year-old man who wanted to do a triathlon but never learned to swim because his dad threw him in as a child. It took about 3 months total, a lot of hand-holding on the steps and shallow end, but he finally achieved his goal and I got to cheer him on at the finish line. I still remember how each of my students clung to my arms and clawed at my neck in their first lessons. I never dunked or forced anyone out of his or her comfort zone. My lessons had to be customized for each student to keep it fun and relaxing. The trauma in their eyes was haunting though. It stayed with me and I never force anything on my kids that they aren't ready to do. It's about trust, not force. I wish every swim instructor was like how you were. I always had a fear of water and pools, so my parents signed me up for private lessons so I could learn. I think I was like 10 at the time. The first lesson the teacher I was supposed to learn from couldn't be there, so she had a colleague fill in. He had been told I was afraid and instead of easing me into it, he started dumping buckets of water on my head when I refused to go deeper than chest deep. I think somehow my lack of movement due to fear annoyed this guy or something. I don't know why else a grown man would aggressively dump water on a kid while she cried. Pretty sure he was laughing at me for being upset too. In the end, after many lessons, I learned to swim a few strokes down a pool but not to tread water. So I might still drown one day, I guess. I'm so sorry. That is so tragic. I had each kid bring several water-safe toys, and we often spent the first lesson just sitting on the steps and playing, talking, or singing. Once they knew me, I'd ask their permission to pick them up and hold them while I stood in the shallow end and just swayed and talked. It was like therapy, but I am not a therapist. My number one rule was no parents on the pool deck until the kid was jumping in and swimming on their own. I told them they could and should watch from a window, but they were not allowed to be out to try and talk over me or help coach. I ended up babysitting and filling in as a substitute nanny for most families. I went to so many kids' birthday parties as a 22-year-old too, smiley face, it was hilarious, but I usually got 10 more clients at each party and I genuinely cared about the kids too. This was in a very posh area of Southern California. I still have a photo album with all the pictures they drew for me and all the little handwritten thank you notes from kids. My kids like looking through it now. 2 days after I graduated high school, I came home to an empty house, all my stuff in a U-Haul because my mom and stepdad moved without me. I have been financially independent ever since, but a heads up would have been nice. Seriously? What is wrong with people? Did you ever see them again? How did you get food and shelter in the beginning? Ha ha. My dad came back from the Vietnam War and his parents had moved without telling him. Strangers answered the door when he knocked. Wow. For real? That's harsh. Literally. Why have a child if you are like this? That's horrible. Those first few months must have been so difficult for you. Did they even leave you any money at all to get you started? Damn, I'm the youngest in my family, so once my sister moved out, my mom was like, you don't have to pay any bills, I'll buy all the groceries and cook and clean, just don't leave. My stepmom walked us, me, sister, and brother 10 to 12, deep into the woods and left us there to learn survival skills. We thought we were all out on a hike, then she distracted us, and ran away. We wandered into camp hours later. We knew how to get back but searched for hours worried that something had happened to her. She was drinking margaritas and smirking. Edit. Thank you all for the smiles and awards. I freaking love the wilds of our / Hansel, Gretel? That can't have been legal. My mom's whole parenting style was sink or swim, but funny enough, it's when my mom tossed me in the pool. The summer between first and second grade, my family moved somewhere with a pool. My mom was adamant that I had learned to swim as a baby, so she bought floaties for my younger sister and refused to buy any for me because I already knew how to swim and was too big for floaties. When I refused to get into any part of the pool I couldn't walk in, my mom called me from outside the pool and promptly grabbed me and tossed me into the 6-foot end. And surprise! I didn't know how to swim. I remember splashing twice, hearing my mom yell at me to stop panicking. Then I went under and tried swimming to the surface like I'd seen in movies, and eventually got my head a bit above water, coughed out a bunch of water and started screaming for help before I went under again. My mom told me to stop making a scene and swim towards the edge. I made it to the edge and couldn't pull myself out of the pool, so my mom yelled at me to swim to the shallow end. When I tried to grab onto the edge to just pull myself to the shallow ends, my mom kept taking my fingers off the edge and yelling for me to stop playing and just swim. When I finally got to the shallow part, my mom and family just went, "See, you still remember how to swim. You never forget." The biggest cause of drowning is not actually a lack of knowledge, but panic. So even if you had known, putting you in a terrifying and stressful situation significantly increases the chances of drowning. When people get scared, they behave instinctively, and if you aren't very experienced at swimming, it turns out your natural instincts are pretty terrible for swimming. I used to teach swimming lessons. You never know how the kids will respond. One slid into the shallow end, but too short to touch, immediately went active drowning swimmer. She was textbook. Obviously, I grabbed her within seconds, and just thought, it really does look like that. Active? I've seen kids jump into the deep end and not come back up. Legit had to do a submerged rescue, and the little butthole has the gall to tell me it's my fault for not telling him he couldn't stand. 10 feet deep was written on the dock in big red letters. Well, the next step is passive drowning, which means unconscious. Didn't let that happen, haha. I also had a submerged kid during a lesson. He went down and I was like, Oh, he'll come up. But his hands were just above his head, eyes open wide. Maybe not. I grabbed him and pulled him up. He was probably about 4 feet under. He was always a happy kid, yelled over to his mom, "Mom." I almost drowned. I never made any saves lifeguarding, but lessons, man, kids drowning left and right, just doesn't faze you anymore. I had one of those. A little boy, about 4, was just staring at me less than a foot away. He could touch, but the water came to just under his eyes when he was on flat feet. He could have gone on his tiptoes to breathe, but he stood there staring at me with his mouth underwater. I kept teaching and talking to all the kids for about 15 seconds until I realized he still hadn't come up and he was looking more and more scared. I put my hand out to him and he grabbed it, climbed me like a tree and started crying and coughing. I was a little freaked out that this kid was just drowning in front of me and I wasn't doing anything because he had frozen in panic. He could have gone on his tiptoes or reached me if he moved his arms. I only reached out to him because he looked a little scared with these huge eyes. My mother said exactly the same thing to me. I taught you to swim as a baby. 1. I'm betting you didn't. 2. The F am I meant to remember that? Babies can instinctively swim, well, more like doggy paddle. It's not a learned behavior. Plus babies are fat. Once you get older and start relying more on learned behaviors than instinct, you're then out of luck. You're also generally skinnier, so less naturally buoyant. My dad actually did throw me in a pool to see if I could swim. Not my dad, but my mom's friend thought I was faking a fear of water and inability to swim. When I was 3 or 4, I was learning to doggy paddle pretty well and would paddle off the stairs of my grandma's apartment complex pool, do a little loop and come back. Well, I miscalculated, missed the stairs once, and went under for several seconds. My older sister, 10 at the time, was able to pull me out. Grandma had hip surgery so was unlikely to get a rescue from her. After that, I was pretty much done with swimming. Like I'd get in the water only if I could touch the bottom. Fast forward a year or so and this woman says, "Oh, I can teach him to swim," which really meant yelling at me to just swim and quit being a baby. Eventually, to prove I was lying, she threw me in the deep end of her pool. I sank. Guess who pulled me out? My sister. The effing woman would have watched me drown to prove a point. I don't think my mom continued to keep her as a friend when she found out. I never saw her again. I'm a relatively strong swimmer nowadays. Have my advanced open water dive cert and I'm pretty self-sufficient at not drowning. Because of the mentioning of drowning, bad judgment, and scuba, I thought of this story. Dive Master told me about a couple of spearfishers in South Florida who went inside a wreck. Spiegel Grove or something like it. It was big. These two ended up getting lost, went way past their bottom time, and nearly ran out of air. When the Coast Guard found them, one had shot the other with his spear because the other wouldn't give him his spare air. They had to sit in a small decompression tank together when they surfaced. I'm sure that was awkward. Original poster replies. That's exactly what happened to me. I was always a picky eater growing up. One time my mom sat me down with a small bowl of almonds and told me I couldn't get up out of my seat until I finished it. I insisted that I hated them and they were making my mouth itch. She thought I was just being difficult. I just started to swallow the almonds like pills because my mouth was so itchy from chewing on them. A couple years later I saw an allergist and discovered I was allergic to tree nuts. My mom did this to me with a peanut butter sandwich. You can't leave till you eat it, laughing my butt off one bite, and I ended up in the hospital. You sure showed her. Laughing my butt off, honestly, while it's terrible, it is a satisfying payback. That bill probably wasn't cheap. Really putting the pay in payback. My mother-in-law did this with my husband as a kid, but it was oyster soup. She made it every Christmas and forced him to sit and eat the whole bowl, which he always ended up vomiting up. He's not allergic, but he hates oysters with such a passion now that he will get sick to his stomach if he sees them. He might have grown to like them or at least not hate them as an adult if she hadn't forced the issue, but the years of associating oysters with vomiting ensured that would never happen. Oh man, I used to love beef stew, but last time I made it, I messed up on the reheat and got myself sick. And I rarely vomit, so it's always memorable. I can't even think about beef stew now, and it was just one time. Can't imagine years of it. That's awful. My parents always yell at my little brother to finish his food. He's not allowed to do anything until he finishes. Once he threw up in his soup and his dad made him eat it because he thought he was lying so he wouldn't have to eat it. There was literally cereal chunks in it and everything from that morning. He hates soup now. I hate parents who never listen to their kids. Wait, they made him eat his own puke? WTF, that's literally child abuse and the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. That is absolutely child abuse. They didn't want to teach me to tie my shoes, because my mom said I had to learn that myself, so should you. My in-laws were like this with their kids. So when my husband and I started dating, I got to teach him how to eat without grasping his silverware like a toddler, showed him an easier way to tie his shoes, taught him better hygiene, etc. He was able to do everything on his own, but it was very clear that he had to figure it out on his own, and no one ever bothered to teach or help him at any point. It's amazing how parents forget to or don't realize kids have to be taught certain things. My grandparents taught me a lot and tried to make up for my parents. My dad never tried to teach me anything after walking and speaking, and when she and dad split up, mom was too busy. Most of what I learned as far as life skills go, I figured out on my own. Being the oldest child, I was always left in charge of my younger siblings and taught myself how to change diapers and make age-appropriate lunches. By the time I was an adult, I had a firm grasp of the basics for a lot of things, but really couldn't cook anything that didn't come from a box until a combination of my husband and the internet taught me. I have no kids now, and my parents act like it's crazy because as a kid I was such a good little mom. At least the rest of the family seems to understand that being a mom as a kid made me not want to be one as an adult. As a kid, I was such a good little mom. Yeah, I know what it's like now. I've got advance warning. No way in hell am I doing it again with kids I don't get to give back. I like to say I've done my time already. Similar thing happened to me. Parents always got me shoes without laces, so I never got a chance to learn. One day I get shoes with laces, I go to school, and they get undone. I ask a teacher for help and she says, "You're in first grade, so you should know how to tie your shoes," and refuses to help. My parents used to always peel my banana, so in the first grade, I also went to the teacher for help with my banana and she looked at me like I was an alien. Needless to say, I have never asked anybody to peel my banana. Your story and the one before about not helping a literal 6-year-old tie their shoes bums me out. What a beautiful teaching moment those teachers completely neglected. They could be instilling discovery, problem solving, just skills in general, at such a tender age, but, no buttholes here. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.